So to start us off, we're discussing Hellraiser from 1987. It's about a man named Frank who opens a portal to hell when he tinkers with a special puzzle box that he's bought while abroad. It unleashes some gruesome beings known as the cenobites who tear Frank's body apart in an act of ultimate pain and pleasure. When Frank's brother and his wife Julia move into Frank's old house, they accidentally bring what is left of Frank back to life. And as Julia was having an affair with Frank before he died, he convinces her to lure men back to the house so he can use their blood to essentially reconstruct himself. So I think Hellraiser is a really good movie. It's a fairly unique movie, especially for its time. I didn't end up watching this one until I was about maybe 16 or 17 years old, so it wasn't anywhere near one of the earlier horror movies that I saw. So I probably saw it back in the late 90s, I guess, or around 2000, somewhere around there. I think it's responsible for creating the iconic character Pinhead, which is obviously a beloved character in the horror community. It's got some really cool, gory and bloody effects, and definitely set a new standard for horror movies going forward, I think. The cast in the movie does well. I don't really feel there's any standout performances. I wouldn't even necessarily say that I love Doug Bradley's performance as Pinhead. It's good, but I think it's more the allure of the character itself. But in terms of acting performance, I don't think he quite reaches the same level of my other favorite horror personalities, like Chucky, Pennywise, Freddy. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, just to tag on to that thought, I don't particularly like the character of Julia. I do think the actress does a pretty good job though, because she is such a bitchy character. Like throughout the whole movie, she has one of the most hateable characters, probably one of the top 5 in the 1980s. So I don't like her character, but I think the actress does a good job. The movie as a whole is one of those classics which I enjoy, but it's not one I particularly love. It's definitely a unique movie. It's just really different from a lot of the slashers of the early to mid 80s. I can't think of many movies that really feel like Hellraiser. The design of the cenobites, most of them are pretty fantastic. These particle effects, generally speaking, are pretty good. And even though there's some really strange things in this movie, some things that don't quite make some sense, I suspect many horror fans can sort of look past that. Even if it's not a fantastically made story, it's such a classic feel to it. Now, out of interest, what about Doug Bradley's Pinhead did it do it for you entirely?
Well, I think it's just that he's got such like a monotone personality. Like there's no real highs or lows to his performance. It's almost like watching a robot. So I think it's just simply that. And maybe that's not necessarily his performance. That's just kind of the character and limitations of the character. It's not like he can start singing show tunes or anything.
I'd be okay with that. Hellraiser the musical.
Yeah, so well, maybe they'd make for something even more interesting. But no, I mean it's a good character, and I think he does well with it. But it's just one of those characters that just doesn't quite reach the same heights as those other personalities that I mentioned, like my favorite ones.
I do think what makes Pinhead somewhat unique is that he's not necessarily, well, I guess it depends on how you look at it, but he's not necessarily an overtly malicious character. He is simply doing what I guess he is supposed to be doing. So I just think it's a sort of an interesting character trait.
And I guess another thing is that even when he is doing something with all the hooks and everything, he's really just standing there watching hooks, fly around and stuff. It's not like he's going up and stabbing people and ripping them apart.
Yeah, I think he's long past feeling pretty much anything, so which I guess is somewhat the point of the cenobites.
Yeah, the weird hobo guy in the movie. I mean, it just seems like there's some scenes in there that I don't know. I mean, I don't really know if what does it turn into, like a dragon or something at the end?
I always took it as like a demon.
Demon, yeah.
But angel do some, demons do others. Am I right?
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure I really cared for that part to the movie. I think even if they left that part out, it would have been fine.
Yeah, and there's just a few things that make this movie a little, more difficult to get into. The whole thing of whether or not this is supposed to take place in the US or the UK, because there's so many people with British accents in this movie, but
yeah,
then the main characters, for the most part, are American. It just feels strange.
Yeah.
And that's in Australian, I can imagine. It doesn't matter 1 ounce to you.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly notice it. Doesn't bother me.
Yeah, to me, it's one of the things that isn't talked about much. It's like, they made this movie and did it, just forgot to mention it.
It's a little slow as well at times, especially in that first half or whatever. Well, it's not dull or anything. It just, sometimes it just takes a little while before it really gets moving.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Most of the parts with Julia finding and killing men didn't do it for me. I thought the cenobites were so much more interesting than Julia was.
Yeah, those scenes probably could have been a little more exciting, I guess. Yeah, if we saw more of how Frank's eating these people, or whatever he does to, I guess he just kind of soaks in their blood.
It's like sucking up the life energy and gaining himself. Frank is a pretty sadistic guy. I do have to say I enjoy his performance, especially toward the end of the movie.
He thinks he's such a badass. I'll kick his ass.
I mean, that one line, like, "Calm to daddy," was it? It just, that was, even when I was a kid, I thought it was a creepy line. Nowadays, it might not be perceived the same, but back then, I thought it was a sort of creepy line.
Nowadays, that's what everyone uses to get off, I guess. And I don't, but
of course you don't. Another thing I wanted to mention, and this may just be me, but near the very beginning of the movie, when the Larry, I believe his name is, cuts his hand on that nail, that scene, ever since I was a kid and I've seen this movie, that slow cut on his hand, and the blood spilling, that scene always got to me. I'm not sure why, because most of the time things like that don't bother me, but I always sort of cringe when I see that scene, even now.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a pretty bad cut. It's kind of like one of those situations where you get a hand in a spot, you can't really do too much about it because other people are pulling the mattress one way, and you can't really just kind of like, as soon as it starts, you can't just pull your hand away because it's kind of stuck there. It kind of just makes you go, ugh.
It's interesting. Hellraiser, to many people, is a really classic horror movie, but in my view, there's not a whole lot that you can really speak much about. It's like we said, the special effects are fantastic, but in my experience, pretty much every horror fan has seen Hellraiser, and generally speaking, there's pretty positive feelings on it. But I've never seen many overly long-winded conversations about Hellraiser. People pretty much like, hey, yeah, it's a good movie. The 16 sequels.
Yeah, well, I haven't read the book, as you know. I don't read books.
Yeah, so I actually, I did once try to read, this is, I believe, based off a novella titled The Hellbound Heart. I started reading it, which details Frank's experience after finding the box. And I really enjoyed I guess, I'm not sure if they're called chapters, but I really enjoyed the first segment. Never actually finished it, but I suspect the movie probably threw a few new things in, but from my understanding, there wasn't a whole lot that was necessarily changed. Of course, if anybody has read that novella, let me know if I'm wrong. So, Hellraiser is an enjoyable movie. There's some scenes that necessarily didn't do it for me. Just some things that just seem out of place, and I don't necessarily explain that well. These partial effects are pretty fantastic. I really love the hooks flying out from some torturous abyss and just latching onto someone. I mean, that's some pretty violent stuff. Hellraiser has a lot of things to offer horror fans, and like I said, it's a movie I enjoy, but I'm not like hard over heels about. I'll probably just give it around an 8, which is definitely above average, but there's so many other horror movies from the 80s that I'd probably prefer to watch over Hellraiser.
Yeah, I mean, I give the movie an 8 out of 10. It is a bit slow at times. The effects are really good. It does have one or two standout scenes. As I was saying earlier, Pinhead's character there is an allure about the character that really wants you to see more of him, but he only has a fairly limited role in the actual movie itself. So, yeah, you kind of finish the movie wishing it had a little more bits and pieces of certain characters, or it did a few things differently. Overall, a good classic horror movie. One that I really enjoy watching, but I don't find particularly special.